All right, so undersize width 8.5 by 11. Make sure it's selected as inches in this box here. For resolution, we're going to use 300 pixels per inch. And we're going to change color mode to grayscale. So you can press create. We'll get our composition here, just the white rectangle again. And then what we need is some imagery. So between now and next class, you're going to be collecting imagery. I have a couple examples I'm going to use for the demo here today. I love playing chess, so I have a chess piece here. And I have this thing that I just took a photo of on my desk, or the desk here beside me. So we can use, if you have a scanner, you have access to a scanner, you are welcome to use that. Unfortunately, we don't really have an easy scanner to use in this room. We have one in the room beside us. So if you're here during the day, there's no class going on in room 250, and it's empty, you're welcome to go in there and scan. But you don't have to scan. You can just use your cell phone. And let's say you take a photo of an object, just put it on a solid background. You know, ideally, if it's a dark object, put it on a light background, or vice versa. Because we want to be able to see the exact shape of it so we can cut it out easily without a lot of other details, you know, textures and patterns like on carpet or something. It could just get confusing. It's just best to have it on a solid background. So when you make a new Photoshop file, it automatically has this background layer locked. You can see a little lock symbol beside it. So if you want to unlock the background, all you got to do is double click on it. It will make it into a new layer. You can title it whatever you want, or just leave it layer 0, press OK. I like having it unlocked to start with. Then you can drag and drop the object. So here's my file. And again, I put these, took them with my phone, transferred them to my computer, and put them in the assets folder. Now I can drag and drop them onto the Photoshop document. So here it is. When you drag and drop it, you can resize it, you can rotate it. So again, just like Illustrator, if I hover over my cursor on one of the corners, see it, you have the little resize arrow. I can click, and for this one, I don't have to hold Shift down. It will keep the image scale it proportionally on its own. And actually, if I want to stretch or skew it, that's when I would hold down Shift and I can start messing with it. But I don't want to do that, so I can resize it whatever size I want. If I hover the cursor over further out from the corner, it's a little bent arrow. That's how I can start a click and rotate it. Then once you have it, the size you want, the rotation you want, then you have to press the little check mark. It should be at the top. It says Commit Transform. Press the check mark, and now the image is placed on a new layer here above layer 0. Okay? So now if I select this image, that layer, I can click on it, I can drag it around, I can start moving it wherever I want. Okay? Let me do the same thing with this other little statue. So I'm clicking on it in the File and Finder, and I'm just clicking and dragging it over, letting go. Let's make this one smaller. Move it over here, press the check mark, and there you go. Okay. So let's go ahead and start. I'm going to work on the chest piece. So we have this image in here, but it's the whole photograph. It's the background, the paper texture, the shadows. It's not just a chest piece. We want to work with all of these images kind of cut out as if you're cutting out imagery from like a magazine that you're making a physical collage. You're going to cut them out here in Photoshop digitally. Okay, so I'm going to turn off visibility for the statue. So we're just seeing this chest piece here. There's actually quite a few ways of cutting out the object from the image file. Some of these ways we consider destructive editing. So if I come over to my eraser tool, and first off I have to right click on the layer and press rasterize layer. So when I select my eraser tool and I'm erasing this area around it, this is destructive editing, because once I erase this area, it's gone. I'm not getting it back unless I press Command Z, which is great if I've just made the erasure. But what if I erase the whole area and then I make a bunch of other changes, and then I save the project, I do a lot more work on it, then suddenly it's going to be a lot harder to undo everything to go back to the original image. If that's the case, then it may just be gone. The image, this whole area around it may just be completely erased. So that you could also use the pen tool. There's a pen tool here, just like Illustrator. So the keyboard shortcut is P as well. If I'm selected on this layer, I'm just going to do this really quick. Let's just say I'm selecting around the chest piece. I'm just doing this very crudely, just quickly. And if I right-click, after I close the shape I made with the pen tool, and I right-click on the path, I press Make Selection, and I press OK. Then I can thought I made this. If I delete it, it's deleting the same way. If I want to select the inverse, I can come up here to Select, Inverse. Now everything around the piece is selected. If I delete that, it leaves just this chest piece. And obviously if I had spent more time, it would have cut it out perfectly. But again, this is destructive editing. So if I cut out this chest piece with the pen tool and I delete all around it, it's gone. Okay, so you can work this way. However, you may run into some problems if, say, you want to start adding some of the erased area. If you want to add it back, you can't do that. Now there is non-destructive editing. And that is what I highly encourage you to use. I'm going to spend a little more time on it because it's just the best practice to get used to. And that is through masking. Okay? You may be familiar with masking. We might have added clipping masks in Illustrator. You might be familiar with masking in Lightroom or even in video editing. For Photoshop, it's more of a specific process where we make a mask. We can start cutting out a specific area, and then the mask stays there, and you can always paint it back in. What I say by painting it back in, you'll see in just a second. So if I select this layer, here's the chess piece. This is the layer for the chess piece here on the right side. And again, if you run into the problem that I did where you get an error message says you cannot edit this, just right click on it and press rasterize image. Either it says rasterize image or rasterize layer. Click on that and then you should be able to edit it. Once I have selected on this layer here for the chess piece, then I click on this little button all the way at the bottom. It's a white rectangle with a circle in the center. If I hover over it, it says Add Layer Mask. So I've clicked on Add Layer Mask, and then you'll see this little white rectangle shows up to the right of the image icon. Okay, this is the mask. Then if I come to my brush tool, which is keyboard shortcut B, or on the left-hand side, look for something that looks like a little paintbrush. It's the brush tool. Then when I come over back to my image, if I'm selected on pure black, when I start clicking and painting with that brush tool, it is acting like an eraser. So I can start erasing all this area around the chess piece. You can make the brush tool larger or smaller with the bracket keys, and I really suggest you kind of learning that muscle memory. If I press the right bracket, it makes it bigger. Left bracket makes it smaller. So I can make it bigger and cut out, erase larger portions. Notice I also have, it's a very kind of soft, what we call feather around the brush. If I come up to the brush options up here, click on this little down arrow beside this circle for the brush options. I can increase hardness. So let's say if I increase it to 100%, then you'll notice, you'll see the difference when I start erasing. Now it makes this solid, hard edge versus when it was 0% hardness, it was a soft edge. You just have to adjust accordingly depending on what you are going for, okay? Often, it might be somewhere in the middle because if you zoom way in, and I'm making my brush smaller, and I'm erasing some of these details. So right now, if I get too close with a lower hardness, it's going to be erasing some of the image itself. You see as I go around, it's kind of lightening the edge of the chess piece. Sometimes you might want this because then the image has a nice soft edge, or you might want it less. You might want to have it to be a little more crisp. And also if you keep going smaller with the brush, the hardness, the feather will be smaller as well. So I'm going to start drawing around the whole chess piece like this. So I'm erasing everything around the edges, okay? And this is with my brush tool that's set on black color. Now let's say I accidentally, oh no, I just erased part of the chess piece. Oh, silly me. If I want to, I can paint that back in with the brush tool. I change it from black to white. Now it's doing the opposite. Instead of erasing, I can now fill it back in. So it's filling the image back in all the way around. I can change it back to black. If you're using, you see the foreground, background color here, white and black, it's easy just to click on this little arrow to switch them, to go between black and white. So now I can come back and start erasing again. And so I'm way zoomed in, and this is how, if you're wanting to have like really detailed masking, you're gonna want to zoom in. But it's also more time consuming. So just for the sake of this demo, I'm gonna zoom out. I'm gonna do it much more quickly. So let's just say we're pretending I'm taking my time, going all the way around. So now that I have the basic shape of this chess piece, the rook specifically, now the rest of the image, I can make my brush larger, and I can continue erasing all the paper texture I took the photograph on. So now I have just the rook. Okay? Now I can move this around on its own. Okay? And every time if I rotate it or adjust the size, make sure you click on the check mark, commit transform. I would do the exact same thing. I'm going to do it very quickly with the little statue. I'm clicking on this image. I'm going to right click, come down to rasterize layer. You only have to do that once, hopefully. So I've selected the image, clicking on add new layer mask. And now you can click on the brush tool or press B on your keyboard and start masking out the area around your object. I'm doing this very, very crudely for the sake of the demo. And the move tool is basically the same as selection tool in Illustrator. It's keyboard shortcut V. And now I can move both of these around. So let's say, you know, the rook is like a little, like a castle type thing. Let's say I want this guy, this little statue, to be standing on the castle. So let's say I put the castle here. Let me zoom in. I'm going to rotate the little statue dude. Let me put him right here. Now, notice having him just kind of overlapping on top of the rook looks terrible. Okay? This is where you can start moving around the layers just like you did in Illustrator. So right now the statue is on a layer that's above the rook layer. So if I click and drag it down, now he goes behind the chess piece. And so I can make him kind of look like since I cut out this part of the piece, I can make him look like he's kind of standing behind it. I can place him there. So this is how you're going to start putting these objects together, trying to find ways that they fit and tell some sort of story about yourself. And it can be abstract. It doesn't have to be like a literal story, but think of it in terms of these interactions. Any questions so far? Yeah.
When you have an image, how do you resize it to make it smaller?
So after you put it in Photoshop, you
Yeah,
mean?
like that. How do you get that little square around it?
Okay, so if you don't see the transform controls, it's because this is not checked. Yes, good point. Um, under the top left, if you have a layer selected, click on the little box that next to show transform controls. If I don't have it selected, I can't see the corners. If I do, then I see those little corners I can then click on and start scaling. So next thing we might want to do is adjust the appearance of some of these objects. For example, these two are both looking pretty dark, and they kind of, they're both. The chess piece is a black chess piece. This one is kind of a dirty, dark gray. But we can edit, and we're not working with color, so you're not going to be changing the colors, but you can edit the exposure, lightness and darkness, and contrast of any individual object. So let's do the statue. So I've selected the statue. I'm going to come up to Image, and I forget, yeah, you guys can't see it up here, but under Image at the top, you'll have a little drop-down menu, and then click on Adjustments, or just hover over Adjustments, and then I like to use levels. Brightness, contrast, curves, exposure. They're all gonna do similar things. I think it's just easy to use. Click on levels. It shows you a little histogram here, where you can start moving the slider around, and if you have preview checked, you'll see how it's changing the statue. Let's increase the midtones. Let's make them lighter so it kind of stands out from the chess piece. Okay, so let's just say this is the look I'm going for. I press OK. And now we have a little more contrast, a little more definition on the details of this little statue piece. Okay. If you want to adjust the whole composition, you can come up to where it says the Adjustments tab. If you don't see it, go to the top, click on Window, and then click on Adjustments. But you'll have a little tab here that has all these symbols. If you hover over them, you'll see things like brightness and contrast, levels. Since we're working grayscale, some of these will be darkened out. You won't be able to select them. For example, like color balance, you can't use that adjustment because we don't have any color. But you can click on levels this way. It will. So I was selecting my background layer, so it made an adjustment layer above the background layer. But let's say I want to have have this one adjustment layer affect everything below it. So I'll drag it to the top of my layers, and now everything below this adjustment layer is being adjusted equally. So if I move the slider around, making it lighter or darker, all of the layers underneath it are being adjusted. And the good thing about this is that it's also non-destructive. I can turn that adjustment layer on and off. All right, so this is the basic process. I would, again, I would recommend bringing in some sort of subtle texture, or even like a paper texture for the background. You'll notice on the difference it makes having, it's hard to see, but you can see a little bit like a kind of ridged paper texture here. It just makes it a little more interesting than having like a solid white background.